they would have so indicated. But nobody came to the programming whip indicating displeasure with the items. But we can also indicate to you, House Chair, that in fact the programs that they say are changed, all that has happened is move some items from tomorrow's program to today's program. That is what was then given to all our colleagues on Friday. Had they indicated any displeasure with those movements, indeed, I would have personally come to them so that we have a discussion. We never got an impression that these were difficulties. And we know that the colleagues have been communicating with the programming whip on the movement of items from tomorrow's sitting to today's sitting. At any rate, all the items that are here, House Chair, qualify to be here. There have been 80 seats, they were below the line. All of them, indeed, are matters that are before this Parliament. So there is nobody who will say that we grabbed the matter that was not below the line. All the matters that are here are before this Parliament, and nobody can find fault with these matters being debated in this House, unless colleagues are grandstanding.
Thank you, honorable members. Honorable Mentor.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, I stand to confirm that we were indeed consulted. Since Thursday, there has been approaches made by the whip of the programming from the ANC since Thursday. And subsequent to that, the order paper, which is now here in front of us, was circulated on Friday. We can confirm that, we know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chairperson, may I address you?
Yes, Honorable Waters.
Chairperson, it's nice to know that certain parties were consulted while others weren't. Also, Chairperson, sending a final program out on a Friday afternoon is not consultation, quite frankly. It's not a draft program, it was a final program, firstly, on Friday afternoon. Secondly, I did write to Honourable Bengu on Monday morning. I did, stating our objections to the new program. Yeah, 31 changes, Chief Whip, 31, not one. And it's irrelevant if the items are below the line. Obviously, they're all before Parliament.
Thank you, Honourable.
The programming committee must decide on the program. It can't be on a ad hoc basis and consulting certain parties and not others. And so I'd like a ruling from you, Chair, on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honourable members. From what I get from those who spoke, yes, there was a consultation made, although the DA says, I'm still speaking. The DA says they were not consulted, which I would like maybe the chief whip of the majority party to talk with the DA outside this house now, but we continue with the program for today. Because one thing I know is that, for instance, the first item that we are dealing with now was provisionally agreed to pending the court case, and hence it is here today. So we continue with that, and the only advice I can give, because yes, you talk of consultation, I allow you and the chief whip of the majority party, SDA, to talk. Thank you very much. I will now continue with the secretary reading the first item of the day, first order.
Consideration of report of Constitutional Review Committee on review of Section 25 of the Constitution 1996.
Thank you. I will now allow Honorable Maila to open the debate.
Thank you very much, House Chair, honorable members, guests in the gallery, South Africans from all walks of life, good afternoon. During his State of the Nation address, President Cyril Ramaphosa made a call for the acceleration of land distribution program in order to, amongst others, correct the original sin of land dispossession. We meet here today, 10 long months after this House gave the Constitutional Review Committee the mandate to review Section 25 of the Constitution and other clauses where necessary to make it possible for the state to expropriate land in the public interest without compensation and propose the necessary constitutional amendments where necessary. In doing so, the committee was expected to engage in a public participation process in order to get the views of all stakeholders about the necessity of and mechanisms for expropriating land without compensation. From the outset, it should be clarified that this House did not give the committee the mandate to conduct a referendum. As a result, anyone who makes an overemphasis on numbers will be grossly out of order. The committee adopted various forms of public participation, which included public hearings, written submissions, and oral submissions. It should be understood that there was no form of public participation which carried any weight above the other. It should also be noted that the public participation process that followed is unprecedented in the history of our democracy. As a precursor, the committee hosted a preparatory colloquium which laid a foundation for members to engage with inputs from the members of the public meaningfully. I will deal with each form of public participation as it was engaged by the committee, starting with the contentious written submissions. Advertisements were put in national and local newspapers, calling for members of the public to make submissions on the necessity of and mechanisms for expropriating land in the public interest without compensation or the contrary thereof. Members of the public were given until the end of May, which was extended to the 15th of June. A total of 449,552 authentic written submissions were received. Though it is of no significance, 65% of the written submissions were against amending the Constitution. Written submissions became a subject for litigation, which I will deal with later on. The committee made use of the parliamentary staff and external service provider to determine those in favor of and those against the amendment of the Constitution. Cheers. Now, with oral submissions, those members of the public who made, amongst those members of the public who made written submissions, there were those who made requests to make oral submissions. The committee allowed them space to make oral submissions in Parliament for or against changing the Constitution. My clock is not showing. Now, with oral submissions, the committee was divided into two teams which traveled the length and breadth of the country, visiting every province, listening to the masses of our people about what they want, how they view their future, and their views about resolving the national grievance, the land question. The report before the House captures the views of South Africans. Their arguments enabled the committee to make a resolution which says Section 25 of the Constitution should be amended to allow for expropriation of land without compensation. The Constitution should be explicit that expropriation without compensation is one means that can be used to address the skewed land ownership patterns. Mostly, the people were not comfortable with the 1913 cut-off, claiming that the original scene is as old as when Jan van Riebeeck set foot at the Cape on the 6th of April 1652 at 4 o'clock. Litigation against the process was unavoidable. Mr. Swart of the ACDP addressed the Gonube Farmers Association on the 29th of August 2018, where a decision was taken on litigation. And by then, the committee was still busy with oral submission, but a decision to litigate was already taken. Therefore, it was unavoidable. Honorable Carter of Cope has been crying foul ever since the process started. Her claim has always been that 200,000 submissions from Cope were not considered. What is surprising, honorable members, is that during the 2014 general elections, Cope was voted for by 123,235 people. And this number includes members, supporters, and sympathizers. Now, the underperformance of Cope since 2014 has seen to the gradual eroding of this number. Now, it becomes surprising that all of a sudden, Cope can be able to get 200,000 submissions. Honorable Breitenbach of the DA claims that she went to the holding room where the submissions are kept, and she could not find the submissions by the DA. Now, according to her, the fact that she herself could not find those submissions by Cope means that the process was flawed. This is very unconvincing. Well, with the FF plus, there is a very thin line that separates this party from AfriForum. It might as well be said that in court it was AfriForum and the FF plus. The litigation in question is mainly about written submissions. Written submissions are mainly made by those who are resourced. But being resourced is not a problem. The problem is whether written submissions make meaningful public participation. We learned several lessons from this process. Is the production of a computer-generated template designed by one person, populating the template with his views, and then allowing other people to factor in their names and contact numbers to be referred to as meaningful public participation? Is the mass production of templates merely saying yes or no, aimed at inflating numbers so that the community may not be able to do its work? Meaningful public participation. So, should public participation be aimed at making possible for Parliament to do its work, or should public participation be aimed at holding Parliament at ransom? These are the questions that we need to answer. The lessons learned from this process should be able to give Parliament a better idea on how to engage on meaningful public participation, especially relating to public submissions. In delivering the 14th Chief Albert Luduri Memorial Lecture, the Chancellor of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Chief Justice Mogoeng, said that the solutions to the land expropriation without compensation challenge in South Africa must ensure that enduring peace, stability, and shared propensity. He went on to say, war is not an option. Strategies that militate against peace and stability are not an option. But silence and inaction in the face of life-threatening and humanizing migration, abject poverty and landlessness are also not options. The Chief Justice advocated for dialogue between the dispossessed and those who own land and who seem to be sworn defenders of the status quo. In the same breath, we call on AfriForum and all those parties who support AfriForum, those who are taking the people to court, to reconsider their stance. We urge you as this House to adopt this report. We urge you to make it possible for President Cyril Ramaphosa, the Tumamina volunteer-in-chief, to make right what is wrong. The people want their land. Give the people what they want. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our honorable guests who are very welcome to this chamber, I just want to say, by the rules of this House, unfortunately, you are not allowed to participate in the proceedings. That means by way of clapping hands or making some shouts or even taking photos. So I urge you to sit there, listen, and just go with the flow with a smile. Thank you very much. Honorable Mbambani? Mbambama.
Honorable House Chair, the Democratic Alliance acknowledges that effective land reform must be prioritized and pursued with greater urgency to redress past land dispossessions. South Africa suffers from a history of black people being denied land ownership. But to address this, we do not need to change the Constitution. We need to change the government. The DA wants all South Africans to own their land and property. We want landowners, not tenants. Let us be clear. Effective land reform is possible without threatening food security, without undermining commercial farming, without destroying social cohesion, and without changing our precious Bill of Rights. It is obvious that from the onset, the integrity of the Joint Constitutional Review Committee was compromised by collusion between the wily EFF and the beleaguered ANC. It was apparent that the tail was wagging the dog as the Red Berets ran roughshod over the two cowering ANC chairpersons and all but took over the process of the CRC. One of the chairpersons ultimately resigned from the committee amid the Pusasa scandal. When their duplicity was pointed out, the EFF reacted with the usual impertinence that is so characteristic of these rude, rebel-rousing Red Berets, who surely have had no parental guidance whatsoever in their formative years. Andizuthetha nokuthetha ke ngezinye ingxeqe ezikhonkotha ecaleni kwe-EFF ne-ANC. They are just cheerleaders masquerading as independent political
Order, honorable
parties.
members. Let me hear.
The DA would like to state upfront that the recommendation of the Constitutional Review Committee to amend the Constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation was a foregone conclusion. That is why ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa cynically made a late-night announcement on TV in July that the ruling party had decided to go ahead with changing the Constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation. This was before the committee had even started its work in the Western Cape, thus reducing the whole process to a farce. Even now, the NCOP is set to debate this report tomorrow, despite the fact that this House has not adopted it yet. Isn't it obvious to South Africans what is actually happening here? It was certainly obvious to the ANC in 2017 when debating and voting against expropriation without compensation in this very House. ANC Chief Whip Jackson Mthembu said, and I quote, Section 25
Order,
of our
members.
Constitution is more of an enabler for land
Order, House
reform
Chair.
than a barrier.
Order,
We
Chair,
failed to
near the
take
door.
advantage of its.
Honorable
Near the
Mbabama,
door.
please take your seat.
Members.
Honorable Mguni, what point are you
Honorable.
rising on?
Honorable House Chair, please call the member to order. She may not refer to any member of the House by name. She has to say either Mr. or Honorable. That's what is in the rule book. Thank you very much.
Who did he refer to?
She has said the Jackson Mtembu.
She said, okay, I heard her. He started by saying the chief whip of the ANC. Thank you. Continue, Honorable Mbabama.
Uti Umthembu, blaming the Constitution for the embarrassingly.
Exactly,
slow-
House Chair.
Honorable
Order.
member.
Order.
Honorable member.
Chair.
Yes,
This is now a vernacular version of the same thing.
thank you.
She is doing exactly the
I
same.
heard.
Please call her to order.
Now I heard you saying Umthembu.
My apologies, House Chair.
Yes.
Uti Honorable Mthembu, blaming the Constitution for the embarrassingly slow pace of land reform is both disingenuous and scapegoating. We failed, finish and klar. Ucho no tata. Hundreds of thousands of South Africans agreed with this sentiment in their written and oral submissions. People like Ntate Rakhase from Limpopo, who has been working on his farm and paying the government rent for more than 40 years, but still does not own it. Do you think he truly believes that the ruling party will give him a title deed after amending the Constitution? Bantu baseGwatyu phaphezulu in the Eastern Cape, nabanye abanjengani, will changing the Constitution.
Order, honorable members, you are really shouting now, please. Continue, honorable member. Continue, honorable Mbabama, your time has been stopped. Continue.
Will changing the Constitution make the government give you the title deeds to your land, the one that you have been fighting for all these years? Will amending the Constitution revive all the failed restitution and redistribution farms lying fallow and miraculously turn them into well-run, profitable entities? Will amending the Constitution get rid of the corruption we saw in Malamala, Mpumalanga, and the Estina dairy farm near Frieda in the Free State? Kubantu bethu abahlala ematyotyombeni, nicinga uba lo urhulumente uza kuninika izindlu nee-title deeds zazo emva kokuba etshintshe le Constitution? Hayi, andiqondi. Changing the Constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation is just a political ploy to get votes out of desperate, vulnerable people. The Democratic Alliance knows there is a better way to implement successful land reform. The Democratic Alliance is going to bring change that builds one South Africa for all its people. Nithanda, ningathandi. We reject the report of the Constitutional Review Committee for the farce that it is.
Thank you. Order. Thank you very much. Honorable Malema.
Thank you very much, House Chair. We gathered here today to engage in one of the most important steps in the process of amending the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. This is happening after the successful motion of the EFF to expropriate land without compensation. And therefore, anyone else who doesn't want to hear this fact is because that person wants to distort history. The people of South Africa of all races, age, and social economic background for the first time came together to make their inputs in the public hearings. And therefore, we from the EFF confirm that the process was fair. Everybody else was heard, including those who had a different view. They were given an opportunity to express themselves. The intention has never been to run a referendum, because if we had conducted a referendum, you can be guaranteed that 90% of South Africans would have voted for expropriation of land without compensation. We say so because the parties that support the land expropriation without compensation in this House constitute more than 2/3 majority. And therefore, if that was to be translated into the outcomes of a referendum, you can be guaranteed that you will lose. So we really want to commend the patience of the chairpersons of both committees. They were patient and allowed us, even when at times the debate became more robust. They kept their cool and called everybody to order so that public hearings can continue peacefully. We've experienced that, and we want to congratulate them for having conducted a very dignified and peaceful process of listening to our people. There's one thing that all of you must actually acknowledge, that the white people who came, all of them, poor or rich, the landless white people, all of them came in unison and opposed the expropriation of land without compensation. Because the reality is that where white interest and privilege is threatened, they protect one another. If they don't care whether the other one is in the wrong or not, why would people think alike like that? If it's not an issue of racism and privilege which seeks to perpetuate landlessness amongst those who were conquered by criminals who came into our country and took our land. We, amongst black people and Africans in particular, there were different views because we don't come from a process that seeks to isolate anyone, but we come from a background that seeks to win a debate through an honest engagement. But here you've got a group of people, not only in the referendum, not only in the consultation, a group of people who 90% of them vote for the same party. And you ask yourself, what is this? This is white privilege. This is in defense of white privilege which seeks to perpetuate landlessness amongst our people. Therefore, the black unity, and in particular African unity, is very important when it comes to this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Expropriation of land is essential in addressing the injustice of the past, and the IFP support expropriation of land, and we are very clear on our stance that our position advocates for expropriation of land with reasonable compensation. The IFP has always been in favor of ensuring that people own land, and this was shown how the Ingonyama Trust came about to protect the remnants of what was left when the total mass of land was taken by the apartheid regime. The IFP has been a forerunner for restoring the dignity of the majority people who have suffered at the hands of colonial and apartheid oppressors in protecting traditional land through Ingonyama Trust. Honorable Chairperson, during public hearings and the submissions made before the committee, I was inspired to see a renewed sense of hope among black and white South Africans willingly offering their support for the process of expropriation of land in the interest of the public of South Africa. But this is almost unthinkable to do so without providing a reasonable compensation for land. No one in this House disputes the fact that we are aiming for a peaceful transition, yet not all agree that compensation is a way in which to keep the entire project of redistribution civil. Honorable Chairperson, the process in which the ANC and its alliance partner here in this House tried to rush the report through the committee without having included all written submissions by the public is wrong, shameful, and must be condemned. It is very interesting to see how the ANC and its unholy alliance committee members failed to find a balanced view and reach compromise and consensus on compensation. If the majority of the public hearings called for zero compensation and the majority of written submissions called for reasonable compensation, how can we simply take a skewed stance in favor of public hearings by simply ignoring the written submissions? These two processes, Honorable Chairperson, had the same status. When we have seen, Honorable Chair, what flouting processes have brought us in this country. It has two-word name, the state capture. This government has failed. It cannot be trusted, and it's not doing this process in good faith. People of South Africa, Honorable Chairperson, must know who is rushing this report and what is in their interest. The answers to this can be found in state capture and VPS looting. The IFP rejects this report.
Thank you. Babu Mngwabe, NFP.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chairperson, perhaps in moments like this it's proper to start by quoting what one of the late struggle veterans, Ubabu Heri Gwala of Natal Midlands, said when he was addressing a peace rally here in Cape Town in 1991. He said, and I quote, "When a mother can't give birth a natural way, then a cesarean section must be used because a child must be born," unquote. The National Freedom Party supports the amendment of the Constitution to allow the expropriation of land without compensation. The NFP considers the willing buyer, willing seller strategy to have been the most accommodative and much fair strategy the government used in addressing the land question in this country. But sadly, as we all know, this strategy has been a dismal failure, and the budget could not carry it any further. This therefore means the new much radical but progressive strategy must be adopted, and in our view, that strategy is expropriation of land without compensation. Those who colonize us and those who oppress us made the land question a forbidden fruit for the majority of the population in this country. And now time has come that we cut this fruit and share it with everyone, especially those who are denied it. As an NFP, we want to once again argue that big battles that our forefathers fought against the Western settlers in this country were not battles for right to vote or access to water, but those battles were in defense of their land. For example, the Battle of Isandlwana of 22 January 1879 was never about freedom of speech or gathering. When the Zulu warriors, under the command of Nchingwayo Kamahole Khoza, were approaching the British Army, they had one thing in their minds: our motherland, our inheritance. With that spirit, they defeated the British Army and embarrassed the entire British Empire. The AfriForum, Honorable Sheperson, last week in the Western Cape High Court tried to do what the British Army did. And yes, we defeated them as a Constitutional Review Committee in this House. The AfriForum must be told here and now that their racist argument that the land was not stolen but was discovered empty is the insult to the bones of our forefathers. The leadership of the AfriForum and its allies must be advised to accept in their minds that indeed land in South Africa will be expropriated without compensation. Honorable members, as we adopt this report, let us not do it for this generation.
Thank you very much.
But let us tell our forefathers that they must rest in genuine peace. The land is back. Thank you.
Thank you. Babu Filtani, UDM.
Mabaye kumhlaba wethu. The old order changeth, yielding place to new, lest one good custom should spoil the whole world, unquote. The time for that change is now. For far too long,
Order, honorable members, there's too much noise.
Landless, unbankable, poor, burdensome on the state. This resulted in them being firm ground for restlessness. Research tells us that a restless community cannot focus on self-development and is not receptive to development assistance from outside. It is fertile ground for corruption in return for short-term self-gains. This is the ugly social state we find in our country. Faced with a challenging situation back in 1902, a Russian leader once asked this question: what must then be done? Our response to that is, quote, for things to change, you have got to change the way you do things. Jeffrey Sachs, the erstwhile economic advisor to Kofi Annan and Ban Ki-moon, in their respective terms as Secretary Generals of the UN, lists natural endowments like land as the #1 requirement for development, and South Africa is a developmental state. We know of no economists who advocate for landless economic growth in any country or community. Therefore, people who stand for a landless majority in our country are actually advocating poverty. The current situation is that 13 million people are experiencing food insecurity daily. Yet, with land at their disposal, they could practice what is called cashless economy and be able to produce food at minimal cost to the fiscus. The current commercial farmers produce so much food that they can even export some for personal gain. How does that state of affairs help the public interest? Let us get together as fellow South Africans and craft the terms on which our constitution should be amended. The latest cases emanating from our high courts with regard to land send a clear message that community rights must be protected and enhanced. Amongst others are the Concord judgment by Justice Petse, as well as Justice Poswa, as well as a judgment by Basson on Kolobeni. The time for change is now. Land and development. Speaker, after 24 years of a development path which heavily relied upon foreign assistance as a nation, we need to rethink and redefine our path to development. The means of achieving that needs to be steered and emphasized through the effective usage of land, and thus agriculture as the way of development comes to the fore. As selected legislators, we shall not outsource this responsibility to other nations outside the borders of South Africa. We shall resist burdening the courts with matters that are not placed on their desk by our Constitution. In this regard, the UDM makes a call to all citizens of South Africa to get together and craft the terms on which the Constitution must be amended. It has to, the people who are landless want the Constitution to be amended in order for them to have land. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Milda from the FF Plus.
Honorable Chairperson, every one of us, everyone, stood in front of this podium on Wednesday, the 21st of May, 2014, and here we swore an oath to uphold and defend this Constitution, and we swore that oath in front of Chief Justice Mogoeng. Today you are being asked to say, nah, let's forget that, and remove a fundamental principle, a cornerstone, and a basic right that goes to the very heart of the rule of law in the same Constitution. You all swore that oath. Expropriation without compensation is a very powerful tool and threat in the hands of any government until you actually use it. Poisoned chalice, and your real troubles start. Mark my words today. We are in this mess because the EFF of February to support their motion in this House. I warned the ANC chief whips, but they didn't listen. And from that moment on, the EFF had the initiative, and the ANC followed. Even the final recommendation in this report was proposed by the EFF and seconded by the poor ANC. Today, Parliament is being misled. We are today being... It will embarrass Parliament, and it will not the product of public participation. Written submissions. On 14th of March this year, the President stood here and invited the public to make public submissions. The people listened. 630,000 submissions were made. But until today, no report that deals with those written submissions was ever adopted or discussed by the committee. However, 75% of them said no to the amendment of the Constitution. Then we had civil society who came to make representations. They were ignored. 77% of those said, no, don't amend the Constitution. And Mr. Malema won't know because he didn't attend any of those. No debate was ever allowed in the Constitutional Committee on this process. No debate. It was the first time since 1994 that no debate was allowed on the substance of one single issue in this regard. And you want to take a decision today in that regard. The fact of the matter is, you've made a huge blunder, and the poor ANC is like a drunken sailor falling over a wheelbarrow again. Unfortunately, Chairperson, this whole process was a charade. We wasted the time and the money of thousands of South Africans. We are talking about amending the Bill of Rights. You want to do it in a wishy-washy way that you've done today. The first speech today by the Honourable Chairperson just indicates to you how wishy-washy this whole process was.
Thank you very much. Your
this
time
report
is now
not
passed.
worth the paper it is
Thank
written
you,
on, and it should be rejected.
Honourable Member. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Very report.
Honorable Carter of Cope. Order, honorable members, can we please have order? Can you converse very softly? Thank you. Continue, honorable member.
Chairperson, thank you. The Congress of the People is adamant the injustices and divisions of our past must be healed, and this includes land reform. We support expropriation of land with compensation. It is important, Chair, to put the myths to bed. The property clause was not negotiated at CODESA. Progressive forces got precisely what was required in our final constitution, an explicit mandate for land reform. It empowers and it compels government to undertake land reform and ensure equitable access to land. It explicitly provides for expropriation. Nowhere in our constitution does it insist on willing buyer, willing seller compensation. Nowhere. It was the ANC that decided to go this route so that fraud and corruption could happen at all times. The ANC failed, and it has never used the power to expropriate for land reform purposes. Just and equitable compensation could very well mean little or no compensation, depending on the circumstances involved. The alternative to the current clause is the unjust, inequitable, and arbitrary confiscation of land. Now, Chair, the high-level panel report and the views of academic and authorities all point to the ANC's lack of political will and the dismal failure of government to effect meaningful land reform. Maladministration, corruption, the elite capture of land reform projects like the dairy farm saga. The key remains to align our expropriation legislation to the prescripts of our Constitution. Yet, government relies, and listen to this, on an expropriation act that dates back to 1975. Yes, 1975, when B.J. Vorster, the Woord's successor, was the Prime Minister of the pariah apartheid state. It is our expropriation legislation that should make explicit what is implicit in the Constitution. Now, Chairperson, landowners and the landless have spoken, research has spoken, experts have spoken, workers have spoken, our farming communities have spoken, business has spoken, and the banking sectors have spoken. But yet, the ANC is hell-bent and brazenly intent to continue with a marriage with the EFF. With what mandate, we ask? Now, Chair, when the process was raised in the State of the Nation address, we asked whose land would be targeted, on what basis, and to whom would it be given? You want to make South African tenants. To date, we have not. That question has not been answered. Our rejection of a report and the reason, therefore, including constitutional flaws in the process and the rejection and consideration of submissions. I'm not going to have time.
Thank you very much. Your time has now expired. Thank you, honourable member. I'm going to switch off your mic if you don't respond.
The power.
Thank you. Honorable Muruti Mishwa.
House Chairperson, the ACDP appreciates the issue of land reform, that it's a complex and deeply emotive issue. We have observed firsthand during the public hearings how divisive the issue of expropriation without compensation can be. While justice must be done, we are also strong advocates of reconciliation and nation building. Biblical justice can be achieved through a process of restitution. It is for this reason that we support land reform and the restitution of land in an orderly and lawful manner. We agree that any decision regarding a possible review of Section 25 of the Constitution must consider the impact on food security, stability in the agricultural sector and the economy, investor confidence, financial exposure to banks and other financial institutions by commercial farmers. It must also provide adequate support for emerging farmers. We agree with the South African Human Rights Commission's contention that while they regard expropriation of land without compensation as being just and equitable in appropriate circumstances, the Constitution does not lend itself to amendments in the detail needed to limit expropriation without compensation in the context of addressing the results of past racial discrimination. Honorable members have to remember that land ownership is not only important to the people of this nation, but it is also important to the Almighty God. 7 chapters in the book of Joshua, from chapter 13 to 19, are dedicated to the allotment of land to God's people. Jeremiah 37:12 says, and I quote, Jeremiah went out to Jerusalem to go into the land of Benjamin to claim his property there among the people, close quote. All those who qualify must have the right to property and title deeds. In September, IOL reported that EFF spokesman on land, Sam Matiasi, called for church land to be nationalized for the benefit of the people and said that church land should be treated in the same way as land held by private individuals, including land held by traditional leaders. The ACDP strongly disagrees. We are totally opposed to expropriation of land, whether owned by private individuals, families, or churches without compensation. In consideration of the Constitutional Review Committee's report on the recommendations, the ACDP is of the view that Section 25 of the Constitution in its current form is not an impediment to land reform and believe that Constitutional Court must be approached to give clarity on the full parameters of Section 25 of the Constitution. Any amendment to Section 25 has the potential to threaten food security, agricultural reform, and discourage investment. Individual property rights must be protected and title deeds issued to the beneficiaries of land reform. The ACDP will definitely not support this report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Dr. Lotriet, GA.
Voorzitter, grondhervorming en grondrestitusie moet plaasvind. Inteendeel, dit moes al oor die afgelope 24 jaar plaasgevind het. Die werklikheid waarmee ons egter vandag gekonfronteer word, is dat die ANC-regering dit nie gedoen het nie. Waar hulle wel 'n poging aangewend het, was dit deurspek met onbeholpenheid, korrupsie en begrotings wat totaal ontoereikend is. Die gevolg is dat daar ter wille van politieke gewin en opportunisme 'n proses deur die grondwetlike hersieningskommissie gestoomroller is wat die land nog duur te staan gaan kom. In plaas daarvan dat die regering introspeksie gedoen het oor sy eie mislukkings en tekortkominge, is daar besluit dat die eintlike rede vir die traapas van grondhervorming die grondwet is. Die grondwet is nou die sondebok en moet nou ten alle koste gewysig word. Maar voorzitter, dit gaan nie net hier om die wysiging van die grondwet nie. Daar word dikwels genoem dat die grondwet al 17 keer gewysig is. Dis inderdaad so. Maar hierdie wysigings of daardie wysigings was tegnies van aard en het nie die wese van die grondwet gewysig nie. In hierdie geval is dit ook nie net 'n wysiging van die grondwet nie, maar 'n besondere wysiging van hoofstuk 2, die handves van regte, wat nog nooit gewysig is nie. Die Handves van regte is die hoeksteen van 'n demokrasie en beskerm bestaande regte wat aan alle mense beskore is. 'n Wysiging hiervan is dus 'n wysiging van reeds bestaande regte waaroor almal beskik. Hierdie handves staan as buffer tussen alle burgers van die land en enige arbitrære handeling van die staat. Artikel 25 spreek juis een van die kernelemente van enige demokrasie en ekonomie aan, naamlik die reg op eiendom. Geen ekonomie kan groei en suksesvol wees as daar nie beskerming van eiendomsreg is nie en waar daar ook nie remedies is teen arbitrære onteiening deur die staat nie. Let wel, arbitrære onteiening. Die motivering wat voorgehou word vir die wysiging van artikel 25 is dat dit wat implisiet is, eksplisiet gemaak moet word. Daar moet nou blykbaar groter duidelikheid gegee word oor wat bedoel word met artikel 25. Die werklikheid is dat hierdie bloot 'n rookskerm is om regverdiging te verskaf aan 'n proses wat selfs nie eers deur almal in die ANC volledig ondersteun word nie. Die grondwet is nie 'n stel regulasies nie. Dit bied riglyne en norme waarin handelinge en wette moet voldoen en gemeet moet word. Die wyse hoe dit in praktyk gedoen moet word, word hanteer deur die algemeen geldende regsvoorskrifte, soos wat daar verwys word na in artikel 25.1. Wetgewing is die meganisme waardeur grondhervorming moet plaasvind onder leiding van 'n regering met die nodige politieke wil en kapasiteit om dit te doen. Dit word nie gedoen deur die grondwet te wysig nie. En daar moet altyd onthou word, die grondwet is daar ongeag watter party aan bewind is. Die grondwet is daar om die burgers van 'n land teen die vergrype van die staat te beskerm. Hierdie aanbeveling dat artikel 25 gewysig moet word, alhoewel dit nou ook voorgehou word as 'n minimale wysiging, maak die deur oop vir enige toekomstige wysigings aan die handves van regte. As dit nou met so 'n gebrekkige proses aanvaar en deurgevoer word, skep dit die presedent vir enige toekomstige wegkalwing van die menseregte van die burgers van Suid-Afrika. Die DA sal nie enige wysing van artikel 25 ondersteun nie. Die DA se beleid stel behoorlike effektiewe versnelde proses van grondhervorming voor. Ons kan en ons sal nie die regte van Suid-Afrikaners op die altaar van politieke opportunisme opoffer nie. Ek dank u.
Thank you. Kgoshigadi Mothapo wa ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson, honorable members. Firstly, let me start by welcoming the announcement of Advocate Shamila Batohi as the new head of National Prosecuting Authority. Advocate Batohi is the first woman National Director of Public Prosecution, and this can only happen under ANC government. From the onset, we, the African National Congress, categorically state our support for the Joint Constitutional Review Committee report recommending that Section 25 of the Constitution be amended to make explicit that which is implicit in the Constitution with regards to expropriation of land without compensation. This is indeed a legitimate option for land reform to address the painful history of arbitrary dispossession of land. Land is a very emotive issue and cannot and will not be left unattended by the African National Congress. It is in the interest of social and economic stability that racially skewed patterns of ownership of land be addressed. Chairperson, the land question is not new to the ANC. In fact, the formation of the ANC is as a result of the dispossession of land of the indigenous African people. The ANC was formed as a result of the Glen-Grey Act of 1894, which sought to make Africans mere wage laborers without means of production. The Glen-Grey Act was later incorporated into the Native Land Act of 1913, which forbade Africans to buy land outside of the 13% which was allocated to them for occupation. Honorable Mbabama, you are misleading the public. This report has been tabled in both houses and is up to each house to decide as to when to debate. For your information, the National Council of Provinces will be debating this report tomorrow. The President General of the African National Congress, then President Priscillas Isakaseme, is one of the leading figures in the struggle for land. In 1913, he established South African Native Farmers Association, which bought the Dagakral and Driefontein farms in the then Transvaal. They would have bought more farms, but were impeded by the Native Land Act, which made it illegal for Africans to buy farms in the Transvaal, the then Transvaal. The forced seizure of land disintegrated Africans from an economic and social life, and we are still seized with that legacy to this date. Honorable Mishwe, Mudimu ka pebeleng o re tswalang le ate le tlale lefase. So re tlo tlala lefase lefe ge wena o shumisha mangwalo a makgethwa ka mokgwa o a sutang wena. When coming to wars of resistance, all wars of resistance were essentially about land. When First Khoikhoi Dutch War began in May 1659, and when the San people viciously resisted the extension of settler farms in their hunting grounds, the war was about land. Le tla tseba gore bagale ba rena bo Kgoshikgolo Sekhukhune, bo Kgoshikgolo Sandile le bo Kgoshikgolo ya Mazulu ba lwele dintwa tše dikgolo ba nyaka gore na ka baka la gore bo magolo a batho ba bang bo magolokhukhu a batho ba bang be ba ba tšetše naga bjalo ka se sebaka re bušetša seriti sa naga go beng ba yona gore batho ba rena ba se sokele batho ba rena ba se fetoge magoba ka gare ga naga tša bona bjalo batho ba rena a ba boele ba be nageng ya bona. And it's very much misleading to say ANC is being led by other parties. I want to educate you on ANC policy on land. Since 1923, when the first ever Bill of Rights in South Africa was adopted by the ANC, human rights and the attainment of justice have explicitly been at the center of our concerns. In 1943, we adopted the African Claims, and in 1955, the Freedom Charter. The constitutional guidelines in 1991, for your information, and the Ready to Govern document in 1993. Since its inception, the African National Congress has been committed to the struggle for the return of land, which was arbitrarily taken through colonialism and apartheid. The land question has been a pillar of our struggle as the ANC. In the 1923 Bill of Rights, we declared that the Bantu inhabitants of the Union have, as human beings, the indisputable right to a place of abode in this land of their fathers and mothers. And all Africans have, as the sons and daughters of this soil, the God-given right that they may share to unrestricted ownership of land in this, the land of their birth. The Freedom Charter clearly states that the land shall be shared among those who work it, that restriction of land ownership on a racial basis shall be ended, and all the land redivided among those who work it, that all shall have the right to occupy land wherever they choose. In our Ready to Govern document, we said, dispossession and denial of rights to land have resulted in the present unequal division of land and landlessness, which will require legislative intervention far beyond the mere repeal of apartheid land laws. Our policies must provide access to land both as a productive resource and to ensure that all citizens have a secure place to live. We also said that the state will play a key role in the acquisition and allocation of land and should therefore have the power to acquire land in a variety of ways, including expropriation in accordance with the provisions set out in the Bill of Rights. We said that property rights should not be in conflict with public interest. So in essence, expropriation of land without compensation is a long-standing provision of the African position of the African National Congress. In line with our consistent policy position on land reform, the 54th National Conference resolved to use inter alia expropriation of land without compensation to accelerate redistribution of land. It is indeed a myth that the ANC is led by others when it comes to the issue of land reform, when in fact the ANC was born as a result of the land question. The African National Congress, NEC, reaffirmed mixed ownership of land, allowing for state ownership and lease, communal ownership and private ownership of land. We take cognizance of the mixed economy we have in South Africa. The ANC does not subscribe to views of Alfred Milner, who tried to influence society into thinking that tribal and communal ownership of property is barbaric. On public participation, drawing from the lessons learned in the cases of Doctors for Life and Land Access Movement of South Africa, LAMOSA, we are satisfied that the Joint Constitutional Review Committee has effectively carried out its duty to facilitate public involvement as spelled out in sections 59 and 72 of the Constitution. Public hearings were held across all 9 provinces. An invitation for written submissions was made, and those wishing to make oral presentation were allowed to do so. The people of South Africa spoke. AfriForum is one of those organizations who were not only present at every single public hearing, who deliberately flooded the system with over 100,000 written submissions, which, as they considered in their founding affidavit, were duplicates, but also made a presentation on 6 September 2018 through their Deputy CEO, Ernest Roots. Instead of enriching the process, Roots abused the parliamentary process of participation by showing utter contempt to the people of South Africa and their struggles, suggesting that 93% of land claimants would rather have money than land. This clearly reflects his and his organization's content with the plight of landlessness in South Africa. He went on to insult the ANC and saying that we are drunk on ideology. He further made a claim that there is no hunger for agricultural land. In a desperate attempt to frustrate this process, they filed an urgent interdict to hold this parliamentary process, claiming that there was no proper public participation in this process. Their urgent interdict was dismissed by a full bench in Western Cape High Court last week. This is not only victory for the drivers of this land reform process, but it is a victory for every South African, particularly the landless. The message to our masses, to the people of our beloved country, South Africa, we have heard you. We know your genuine hunger for land. We were present when you shared your lived experiences, when you told us of the impact of dispossession. We heard you when you shared your plight of lack of security of tenure and the pains of not being able to access the graves of your forebears. We are committed to addressing the historical injustice of land dispossession, and we reaffirm that we shall pursue land expropriation without compensation as a matter of policy. We shall give effect to this resolution in a manner that strengthens the agricultural sector, improves economic growth, and meaningfully addresses inequality and unemployment. We call on government to speed up the process of reintroduction of the expropriation and redistribution bills, and that all relevant legislation should be aligned with the proposed amendment of the Constitution. The ANC support this report.
Ra leboga, Mhlomphehi. Tatan Chaisa from the AIC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. We are happy as African Independent Congress that we have got to add our voice to the voices of many. Honorable Chairperson, the amendment to the Section 25 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa is to be a turning point for the people of South Africa and a history-making. This amendment is about the healing of the wounds of the past and doing away with the attitude of war which existed when the land was annexed and occupied by force by those powers to be. But this is not a racial expropriation of land without a compensation, but the giving of land to the right people. This must be considered as one of the ways of addressing the challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. We hope that more people will be working land and making more productive. However, people need intensive training, the tools of trade, and work implements and skills to work the land. I'm sure, Honorable Chairperson, Africans are prepared to work the land as they were before. The Section 25 amendment is the popular view of the people, as we have seen the consultation on the view. How can we therefore be against the view or the majority in a democratic country? That cannot be possible. For sure, no one will be landless as long as one lives and works in the land, because the land belongs to the people who live and work in it. This is going to be scientific and a very smart approach so as to avoid grabs, land grabs, and outcries of those who are ready to complain. Of course, the government must be smart because we have to avoid the loss of jobs, then guard against inequality, and people should be prepared to work the land. Legal processes should be followed. We are aware of what happened in Zimbabwe, but we are not going to follow that, but we have loaned a land, we have lost a land from that. It means ours has got to be very smart so that we avoid all what happened there. I think we are going to follow and do what is relevant for the people of this country. There must be, and I believe there are, policies that are going to be implemented. The relevant one, economic policies, so as to make our country grow, so that the people now should not starve anymore. So AIC supports the report. Thank you very much.
Siyabulela Tata. Mchamseki Goti of the APC.
Thank you, House Chair, comrades and honorable members. The APC joins all progressives in supporting the adoption of the CRC report. Even though the mere amendment of Section 25 doesn't herald the resolution of our agrarian and social challenges, it is nonetheless a very important step in the right direction. For the Africanists, the land question is not just about fairness. It is at the core of the national question, national sovereignty and independence. Thus, the APC will always support any move that contributes to the reversal of the humiliation and deprivation since centuries past. The restoration of the dignity and humanity of the natives is their reconnection with the land. The Africanist position is that land is a common heritage of the people, not a commodity. All land must be nationalized and socialized for the use and benefit of all, especially the working class and African women. Reactionaries must disabuse themselves of duplicity. We want nationalization of land the same way these reactionaries have no problems with the nationalization of minerals and water rights and usage. Land under traditional African control is under common ownership. It is only land that Africans were permanently dispossessed or in townships that is privately owned. Honorable Chair, it was on the 27th of February 2018 when the House resolved to set up the CRC, which date happened to mark 40 years since the passing away of our great leader, Robert Sobukwe. It is not lost to the APC that today we are adopting the report of the CRC on the eve of Robert Sobukwe's birthday, which is the 5th of December, tomorrow. I urge all of us to adopt this report as a beautiful and befitting gift to Sobukwe. Izolete.
Na cancer. Honorable Breitenbach from the DA.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Let me join the Honourable Matapo in congratulating Shamila Batoyi as the new National Director of Public Prosecutions. On the 27th of February 2018, this House mandated the Constitutional Review Committee to review Section 25 of the Constitution to make it possible for the state to expropriate land in the public interest without compensation. The original EFF motion put by the Honourable Malema talked of wholesale expropriation so that land is nationalised and brought into state ownership. We all know where that will take us. The ANC recommendations fall in line with the NASREC resolution where they resolved to support land expropriation without compensation. This is just, again, the ANC giving effect to the making body in red. The Honourable Maila's form of public submission was favoured, yet the committee is prepared to totally ignore all the written submissions. Let me be clear, Honourable Members. The Democratic Alliance supports urgent land restitution and land redistribution. Absolutely. We acknowledge the terrible legacy of forced land dispossession, the effects of which are still clear for all to see. We support individual land ownership and encourage the creation of intergenerational wealth that land ownership brings. No one will deny the traumatic effect of land dispossession, nor the pain and humiliation that it brought. It was very painfully obvious during the public hearings around the country. But, House Chair, the ANC has had 25 years to address the pressing issue of land reform and has failed miserably. What they have achieved could arguably fill the bottom of a thimble. The Land Claims Court has been severely neglected and under-resourced for more than 17 years, in which time it has had at best only 4 judges and no permanent judge president. The Democratic Alliance is opposed to an arbitrary amendment of the Constitution. It is totally unnecessary. The Constitution already allows for land reform and in fact encourages it. This election roadshow for the EFF, paid for by Parliament and supported by the ANC, is nothing more than a cruel hoax. It has allowed thousands of South Africans to believe that they will each receive a plot of land. The Democratic Alliance has a successful track record when it comes to land reform, with a success rate 6 times higher than the national government statistics. According to the Department of National Land Reform, we have demonstrated by putting our money where our mouth is that we support land reform. We have recognized individual property rights and handed thousands of title deeds to property owners. This protects everyone's rights and gives effect to the constitutional compact of one nation, one future. The EFF and the ANC and their cohorts have abandoned this constitutional construct in favour of a vote-seeking hoax. The approach suggested today by the speakers of the ANC and the EFF has been tried elsewhere in the world and has failed. It has yielded only poverty and misery for the landless and the poor wherever it has been implemented anywhere in the world. It is a blueprint for chaos and economic disaster. It deliberately seeks to stoke racial tension and by definition relies on force, an approach that has no place in a modern constitutional democracy. White and black South Africans alike would lose their homes, their businesses, their intellectual property and more. No well-informed South African would voluntarily hand over their property to any government to become a tenant in their own country. No government should be trusted with this much power. The Constitution is designed to protect the rights of all South Africans against all governments, including now unthinkable future governments. South Africans have the opportunity to prevent this at the ballot box next year and preventing the wholesale looting that has become the hallmark of these parties. The Democratic Alliance stands opposed to any abrogation of existing property rights. These are the bedrock of development and economic growth. Wholesale expropriation without compensation is nothing other than state-sanctioned theft, and the Democratic Alliance will not support it. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Smith will close the debate.
House Chairperson, comrades, fellow members,
Order, honorable members.
fellow South Africans. It is common knowledge that as far back as the 17th century, colonial powers brutally expropriated land and the resources of the indigenous people of South Africa. It is also common knowledge that the British and the Boers reached an agreement known as the Vereniging Treaty to establish Boer republics at the end of the South African War in 1902, which in essence reduced black people to foreigners in the country of their birth. Soon thereafter, the Landon Commission recommended a territorial segregation between blacks and whites. This was followed by the establishment of a whites-only union of South Africa, which made the Governor-General the supreme chief of all native communities and dressed him with powers to appoint or dismiss any traditional African leader at his pleasure. It is this racially based ideological system that allowed the white minority government to pass the 1913 and the 1936 Land Acts. Fellow South Africans, the reading of the Hansard report on the occasion of the debate on the 1913 Land Bill, for me best illustrates the prevailing thinking of the minority government of the time. During that debate, the Member of Parliament from Vicksburg said, and I quote, "They," meaning the government, "should tell him," meaning the black man, as the Free State told him, that this is a white man's country, that he is not going to be allowed to buy land there or to hire land there, and that if he wants to be there, he must be in service. In other words, the black man must forever be a laborer. The strategy and tactics document adopted at the Morogoro Conference in 1969 states that the bulk of the land in our country is in the hands of land barons, absentee landlords, big companies, and state capitalist enterprises. The land must be taken away from exclusive European control and from these groupings and divided among small farmers, peasants, and the landless of all races who do not exploit the labor of others. That same Morogoro document states, in our country, more than in any other part of the oppressed world, it is inconceivable for liberation to have meaning without the return of the wealth of the land to the people as a whole. It is therefore a fundamental feature of our strategy that victory must embrace more than formal political democracy. To allow the existing economic forces to retain their interests intact is to feed the root of racial supremacy and does not represent even a shadow of liberation. Chairperson, at the opening of the ANC National Land Workshop held in May this year, President Ramaphosa remarked, and I quote, "From its formation, the African National Congress has fought for the return of the land to its rightful owners. It has fought for the wealth of the country to be shared, and the rights of all its people to be shared equally and universally respected. We are meeting here to give effect to the demand that was articulated by our forefathers that the land shall be shared amongst those who work it. Fellow South Africans, the ANC believes that the land reform project is about healing the wounds of the past. It is about restoring our dignity, and it is about reclaiming our identity and unlocking the economic resources of our country. We are convinced that without land redistribution, we will never achieve a united South African society, nor will we overcome the challenges of inequality. It is our contention that unless we afford the previously marginalized the means to productively farm the land. And unless we change the apartheid special plans in our towns and cities, we will not defeat the scourge of poverty and unemployment in our communities. The African National Congress is convinced that if we are to maximize the economic value of the land, we must not only distribute agricultural land, but we must also allocate land close to places of employment for residential purposes in the urban centers. We must also provide those living in precarious informal settlements with service sites and security of tenure. It is important to emphasize that the land reform project must not undermine economic investment. It must enhance agricultural productivity, and it must not disrupt food security. We are very clear that the willing buyer, willing seller, or the market-driven concept cannot and must not be a mechanism for redistribution of land. It is this market-driven concept that in the past was used as an instrument to resist or retard the land reform project. The newly established Office of the Valuer General is a welcome development. It must be well capacitated to independently moderate all land reform valuations. The Land Bank, the Land Claims Court, and all other state machineries must be appropriately resourced and upskilled. Chairperson, expropriation of land without compensation alone is not enough, and neither is it a panacea for the land problem in our country. It is our view that there is a need for a much wider policy overhaul to ensure a proactive, needs-based acquisition of land. With regard to the policy overhaul, we support the proposal of the NDP for district-based stakeholder forums that will play an important role in establishing the needs and identifying which land is available to meet those needs. We call for all laws of general application in this regard to be fast-tracked. Speaker and fellow South Africans, in 1996, when the final constitution was adopted, the text of Section 25 was constructed with the forethought that it would facilitate rather than hinder land reform, including redistribution, restitution, and security of tenure. 22 years after the certification of the final constitution, it is important for South Africans to reflect on the constitutional framework for the land reform program in South Africa. The ANC is of the view that the lack of clarity around the permissibility of expropriation of land without compensation has contributed to the slow pace of land reform. We support expropriation of land without expropriation. We support expropriation of land without compensation or zero-rand compensation in the public interest, as informed by our 54th National Conference resolution. Ours is a call for a mixed ownership model that includes individual ownership, state ownership, and communal ownership. Chairperson, the African National Congress makes the following firm proposal to this august House for your consideration: that Section 25 of the Constitution be amended so as to make explicit and incontestable that which is implicit, namely that expropriation of land without compensation be but one of the mechanisms of the land reform program. Chairperson, the land issue has always been central to the struggle for freedom and democracy in South Africa. And yet, certain sectors of the South African and the international communities continue to deliberately misrepresent the proposal for land expropriation without compensation. These sectors mischievously propagate that our stance is informed by an anti-white agenda. We must emphasize that no one in the ANC has ever suggested that whites or anybody else be discriminated against in the resolution of the land question. Fellow South Africans, expropriation of land in the public interest is about redressing the effects of the original sin of arbitrary dispossession of land. Expropriation is about the access to agricultural and residential land by all. The land reform project must be about the creation of a democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and a united and prosperous nation. The just and equitable redistribution and restitution of land is about ensuring stability in our country. Chairperson, fellow South Africans, comrades, this land is our land. And we believe that meaningful reform that results in all of us, black and white, being afforded equal access and ownership to land can no longer be postponed. At this point, Chair, maybe we should talk to some of the issues raised very briefly. The ACDP and COPE talk about academics spoke to us, that the high-level panel spoke to us, and they're correct. They did speak to us, and they did say what they said. However, the voices of the academics can never trump the voices of the landless people. Why don't you tell us what the landless people said? I also want to go to the point raised by the Honorable Mulder. We agree, Honorable Mulder, that 77% of those that wrote supported it. Nobody has disputed that. We agree that those that came to make oral presentations in Parliament supported it, 77%, as you said. Nobody disputes that. What you leave out is the percentage that supported us when we went to the provinces. And you deliberately don't say that those that supported us in the provinces were probably 99% of the submissions that we received. You don't raise that point, and I think we should fix that up. I also want to raise, Chairperson, that the Honourable Rotridge says that, and she says it in Afrikaans, I'm paraphrasing, that the Constitution mustn't be changed because dit moet ons beskerm, of dit moet die mense beskerm. Die vraag is, teen wie moet dit beskerm? Who must it protect? Must it protect those that are the owners of land, or must it protect of land? The Constitution is not written in stone. It can be and it must be amended. And then obviously, honorable members, the ANC has always said and will always say that expropriation of land without compensation is the way to go. We are saying as the ANC that those that oppose the access of land to our people must be remembered when we go to 2019, because it is those people that will keep us back from creating a united, a prosperous, and a democratic South Africa. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honourable members, that concludes the debate. The motion is that the report be adopted.
Chief Whip.
Chief Whip? The Chief Whip, yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Yes.
I move that the report be adopted. Thank you.
Are there any objection to the motion that the report be adopted? There being objections, I now put the question. Those in favor will say aye. Those against will say no. I think the ayes have it.
Deputy Speaker,
yes,
we call for a division on this constitutional desecration.
A division having been called, the bells will be rung for 5 minutes. There are no abstentions. There's 91 noes, and there's 209 yeses. The report is agreed to. There's a second order. Secretary? Huh? What? What's happening? Before. Chief Whip.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Speaker, I'm rising on a point of privilege to indicate that on Thursday we'll bring a motion that will seek to take this process forward by amending Section 25. We'll bring that motion before this House.
Okay. I see that Chief Whip has chosen to provide information here. The Secretary will read the second order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Telecommunications and Postal Services on ICAMVA National E-Skills Institute Bill.
The Chief Whip.
Thank you, Chair. We move that the report be adopted by the House.
There any objection? The motion is that the report be adopted. Any objections to that? No objections. Agreed to. The third order.
Second reading debate, ICAMVA Digital Skills Institute Bill.
The Minister of Telecommunications and Postal Services. That's a maiden speech in her new capacity.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honorable members, ministers, good afternoon. We stand here before you to present the ICAMVA E-Skills Bill. You will remember that in the National Development Plan, we have been given a clear mandate of ensuring that we improve digital literacy. This therefore meant that as the responsible department, we have a responsibility to provide that we needed to do in terms of ensuring that we coordinate all those that are involved in the digital skilling program. The lack of coordination and collaboration within and across government departments and state-owned companies in developing and delivering a program of capacity building contributes to increasing the digital skills challenge, and that hinders investment. This affects the country's capacity in accelerating digital skills capacity development in underserviced areas in order to make South Africa digital literate by 2030, in line with the National Development Plan. In response to the aforementioned challenges, we therefore developed this legislation of ICAMVA digital skills, and it sought to make sure that we do the following. We establish objects and functions of the Institute. We promote the development and meaningful use of digital skills. We establish the functions of collaborative laboratories for digital skills knowledge production, training, and coordination, as we refer to them as collabs, to provide for the governance and management arrangements for the Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, this, as I said, seeks to bridge the divide that is out there. If you go to our areas, our people every day, they complain of the internet. In the areas that we have provided internet, people are not able to use it effectively for economic growth. And therefore, our introduction of this bill seeks to make sure that as people participate in the cyberspace, they are able to derive an economic spin-off. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable J.L. Matang.
Honorable Speaker, ministers, colleagues, first of all, we would like to congratulate the Minister, Stella Ndabeni, on her appointment into the new position. Hers is not an easy job. It is a very difficult situation. We wish you well, Madam. We also would like to congratulate the former minister, Dr. Siyabonga Cwele, on his new redeployment. And Honorable Speaker, I want to declare that I'm not a praise singer, and I will not praise or sing praises to any politician, but I must at least confess in this House that both the Minister Ndabeni as well as Minister Cwele have been very exemplary in their respect to the Portfolio Committee. They would attend. If they are not attending, they will call us and send a letter to tender their apologies. And we wish that as they continue to prosecute their responsibilities, they should continue to respect both the House and the committees as they have been doing. The bill that is before us introduces the IGAMVA National E-Skill. This is an initiative that came about after the department introduced the bill. The committee accepted the bill and published the bill in all 11 languages, and it was circulated to all provinces. Only 4 submissions were received, and the committee entertained them. All of the submissions supported the enactment of this legislation. As a committee, having deliberated on the purpose and the objects of the bill, resolved to rework the bill from scratch and produce the current bill, which speaks to the spirit and letter of both the policy and the Constitution. At the onset, it is fair that one thank all members of parties that participated throughout the enactment of the bill, and there happened to be only 2 parties, the ANC and the DA. The other parties did not attend. So what it means is there is a consensus in the enactment of this legislation. But we know that Parliament allows members to participate and debate in the manner in which they do. We do indeed accept that arrangement by Parliament. The object of the bill is to provide for the promotion and development of meaningful use of digital skills, to provide for the establishment of Igamba Digital Institute, to provide for the establishment and functioning of the institute, to provide for the establishment of collaborative laboratories for the digital skills, knowledge production, governance, training, amongst others. This bill is enacted in line with the ANC 53rd and for the 54th conference, with the aim of providing access and addressing the whole issue of inequality on access. The question is, what does the future hold for us? The minister in her address gave us a glimpse of what the future holds for us in the digital space. We are told that the digital life will be very disruptive. We'll witness more machines speaking to other machines than people speaking to people. Technology will change our lives radically. You'll be in a position to access the world